Welcome back to Communicology. Today I want to wrestle with the idea that we have seen the death of in-person experiences. What do I mean by that? We'll dig into that in a second. But first, please, if you would, give a like, a share, a subscribe. I would appreciate that to help with the YouTube algorithms. Let's get into our concept that we're talking about today, and that's the death of in-person experiences. What do I mean by that? Well, have you ever noticed that as technology has grown up and gotten more pervasive in our lives, we have had less time together? And I'm not talking about just something simple as like the in the family unit or at schools, although that's something we'll definitely consider. But I'm talking about as a society, we've seen that kind of thing happen too. And it's going to sound a bit like I'm an old guy just wishing for the old days, but hear me out. There's some validation there. Growing up, it was not uncommon to have all kinds of neat, fun things to do. And that was primarily to get out of the house and go find things to do. And it was usually with other people. And you would spend time with them, actually with them in person. And we would do all kinds of neat, fun things. Like one of the high mark things that we could possibly do is get together every day and play some ball. It doesn't matter, football, baseball, basketball, it didn't matter as long as somebody had a ball. We would get together and we'd figure out whose house and what we're going to do and play. Or some other kind of, type of, game that required other people to be involved. That was something simple. It was also a great treat to be able to get together and once in a while have the high school dance or the junior high dance. In my town, it was the YMCA Recreation Center, or as we call it, the Rec Center. We'd get together once a quarter or so for a dance. And you just don't have those kind of gatherings really much anymore. And then another thing, too, that was big and formative growing up is cruising. Now, if you're young, when you think cruising, you think of getting on a ship somewhere for a week. Now, cruising is when you got in your car and you just cruised around. Now, at the very basic level, you and a few friends would pile into a car and drive around and enjoy each other's company as you just drove around and talked, and just the car was just the mobile vehicle that you would enable you to continue having your conversations. Just as long as you weren't stuck at a home somewhere, you were now just driving around. Now, often though, a cruise usually involved other people cruising. In my town, it wasn't very uncommon at all to park and hang out at the local McDonald's. And you would drive around, find a place to park, back in, and just get out of your car and just stand in groups and talk until the management came out and kicked you out, and then you left and you drove down to the other end of the downtown block and parked along the railroad tracks and got out of the cars and talked until the cops came and kicked you out for loitering, and then you drove up to the McDonald's and start the process all over again. Maybe you went so as far as to buy a glass of a drink and then just sip on it for an hour just so you could say you were a paying customer and got to sit in the lot. But those dreams of yesteryear are just being told to be pining for years gone past. But it's a time that we actually focused on getting together, that we enjoyed being together in person. And there's a great value to being in person that you can't find in today's world. And this is not a new concept. This is not something that is just old me shaking my fist at the clouds. It is actually something, if you go back in time far enough, like to the invention of the book, you'll find the same kind of problem. Because in a time when we used to share stories with the clan and with the other people, it was important that we would gather together around the fire and tell stories with each other. But as soon as the book was created, people could go off on their own and sit and read the stories of the people by themselves. And that was thought to be a dangerous thing because it would ruin the fabric of the clan. And with a couple thousand years of hindsight, they're right. And it's one of those things where we tend to wrestle with what we have now in our digital landscape of everybody moving online. And we call it social media. And as we've talked before, it's not really social, because media, or medium for the singular, is something that's in between. That's the literal definition of the word, is something in between. So there's something in between us. And therefore, it's hard to be social if there's something in between us. Therefore, whenever we get to the social gatherings in person, it feels like a weird scenario because we're so used to something being in between, whether it's time and space or just this odd chunk of plastic and glass, whatever it happens to be. There's a distance, there's something in between us. And we start to wrestle with the idea of, what is actually an in-person experience. And we can't handle them, and you end up seeing issues galore, from millennials to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, not wanting to be around other people, not knowing how to talk to other people, not able to hold eye contact, not be able to form sentences, not be able to resolve conflict. So what are things that we see? Well, growing up, it used to be a really cool thing to go skating, and there was a skate rink outside of town called Billaloo, and people would go skating there, and it was fun. You listen to music, you go roller skating, and it was just a great time to get together with friends and enjoy each other's company. Again, there's just all these little events that allowed you to do that, but not just for youth too. I mean, you look at the concepts of barbecues and cookouts. Those used to be much bigger, much more important, and not that the world would stop for them, but it was just one of those things. You'd have a cookout, and you'd invite neighbors or friends, and people would come and hang out and just talk for hours. Just hang out in person, just hang out and just enjoy that time. Again, it's one of those things that just disappears whenever you start introducing technology and the rush of the modern world into it. And, other things that have come into play, and this is something I've wrestled with and noticed for a long time too, is the death of the reunion. Whether it be a high school reunion or a family reunion, those have kind of died off too. One, because a lot of people don't have a great desire to be in person anymore, which makes it really hard to have reunions when people don't like being around other people in real life. But the other problem too is when you have technologies like social media, it kind of kills the purpose of the reunion, because the whole purpose of the reunion is to reunite. We have been apart for a year, and we're going to reunite. Well, thanks to social media, I'm friends with a lot of people I went to high school with. And as a result, I see what they post every day. Pictures of their kids, pictures of what they had for breakfast, pictures of their pets, pictures of their jobs, everything like that. So when you get together after a year, what's there to talk about? You already know. You know about them, they know about you, and all of a sudden you kind of killed the impetus for the reunion. Why do I need to get together? I already know. So you can see the danger here, and people would say, well, yeah, it's a great way to stay connected. So instead of once a year, you're staying connected all the time. But you're not really staying connected. It's not an in-person event. It's basically like scanning somebody's web page and trying to see what Wikipedia has to say about them. And it's not the same kind of thing. It's not interaction. It's just reading and observing. It's much more voyeuristic, and it's not it lacks all those interpersonal gems that we enjoy whenever we get together and we get to talk and discuss, and we get to share each other's hopes and dreams and fears. Those kind of things tend to disappear whenever you move into that space, and it becomes very difficult. And it's hard on adults, and it's hard on children, because people are meant to be together, and people are not meant to have dividers in between them. People are meant to spend time together. That's why whenever you see kind of situations where people have either like cancel cultures or going contact free and things like that, have been so damaging to families, to friend groups, because it's one of those things that when you have a social media world that tells you all you have to do is delete or block or ban, and you can or snooze, you can just kind of get away from somebody. That's not a real life thing. In real life, people actually exist. Online, they're just pixels. In real life, people exist. And whenever you ban somebody in real life, it's horrible and painful to that other person. whenever you block them, whenever you go no contact, you cause a lot of damage. And ultimately, that's not how we're made. And for those of you who hold to pretty much any religion, it's not even remotely, healthy from a spiritual standpoint either. It's most certainly not Christ-like. We are meant to be together. Man, whenever he was alone in the garden, God looked at him and said, "It is not good for man to be alone," and created woman. We are meant to be around each other. We're supposed to be able to enjoy each other's company and spend time with each other. And we start losing this whenever we start moving to a purely online situation, to where we live and breathe and do everything online. We've talked before about the concept of having the virtual self and virtual community and people who act and live purely online. And it's a damaging thing. I had a student this past semester who created a video essay for me in one of the classes I teach, and basically taught about how she didn't feel like she knew how to fit in, but when she put on her headphones and started gaming, everything was just all right, and she felt like she was welcome and necessary and everything like that. And I thought, she's talking in such a way that this is a good adventure and a release for her, not as in this is a very sad and horrible thing for her. And that was a terrible thing to hear, and it was sad because that's the way a lot of people are. They want to escape the world, and instead of knowing how to deal with it, they run to safe spaces. And their safe spaces are online, and their safe spaces are filled with other people seeking safe spaces where they just affirm each other in their safe spaces. And as a result, you end up having people who are broken and in need of help just turning to each other and reaffirming the brokenness instead of wrestling out how to solve it and resolve it and escape from it. And that's a very sad and dangerous thing. But that's on the far deep end. But you swing it back towards the more commonplace issues that we all wrestle with, is the idea that whenever you lose these in-person experiences, you miss out on everything that we have at our disposal to make us enjoy each other. I mean, God gave us 5 senses that we can spend time and get to know each other and enjoy that time together. Obviously, to be able to see each other. You can see each other, sure, with pictures and with video chatting, but in reality, those are 2D representations through pixels. In real life, we see depth. We see everything. We see full body language instead of just your picture on a little on a profile picture or a video from a little screen on the TV monitor. In real life, you get to see the whole picture of the whole person. You get to see body language. You get to see smiles and frowns. You get to see tears welling up in the eyes that maybe you wouldn't catch on a webcam. And obviously, you get to hear them as well. Well, you get to hear people with a phone call. You get to hear people with a video chat. But again, you're hearing a digital replication of them, and you're not hearing the real voice, the wonderful tone that comes from the voice box and how you were created to make sound. You're missing all of that. And then smell, you miss that too. Now, maybe, of course, if you smell bad, maybe that's a good thing, right? But otherwise, the things that we do, like when you think about perfumes or colognes or any kind of body wash, the things that we do to just smell better, we miss that. It actually adds to a conversation. It changes a conversation. And of course, you have touch. Touch, of course, is hugely important because, I love a good handshake. I'll do a good fist bump now and then. And hugs are really cool too. And you lose all of those kind of things whenever you go to a digital world, whenever you start to eliminate the in-person experience. You get together and shake hands and high five and hugs and all that good fun stuff. It all disappears. And humans crave touch. It's just the way that we're made. We're not made to go without it. And I'm sure you remember, if you care to, if you go back into 6 years ago, into the time of the pandemic, and the idea of being forced into isolation where you couldn't go talk with anybody, how much you realized that this non-talking for 24/7 for weeks on end was awful. It was actually awful. And as someone who teaches and sees students on a daily basis, I was doing video classes with all of them, and you could see in their faces, like every day, their picture getting worse and worse and worse. You could just tell that it was really grinding on them, that they weren't together, even in the basis of showing up for class, being with other people in fellowship with in class. That changes everything for them. And it's one of those things that, again, showing up for work, showing up for class, it's a lot of people, like when they're in the moment, they lament it, but they don't realize how much they need it. And students need that kind of thing. And then, of course, taste, that's one of those things. Obviously, we don't taste each other much, but obviously in intimate moments with someone with whom you care, if you're away from them for a long period of time and you don't get to kiss them, you feel it, you know what that's like, how rough that can be. And you can't do a digital kiss and I'm gonna put a kiss emoji on this text message. It's like that holds no meaning. When it comes down to actual kiss, there's something magical about that. And it's meant to be a magical moment, and it's meant to be this moment of intimacy that you lose when you get rid of the in-person experience. Now, I've mentioned before in other episodes before how I've dealt with some of this stuff. Like in my classes, I have a table up at the front of my room where every student who comes in, they have to put down their phone. They don't get a ticket with them to their seat because, they're always wanting to play on their phone. And my colleagues are always frustrated, like they can't get their students' attention because they're always playing on their phones. And it's like, well, just take them from them. And they're like, you can do that? I'm like, yeah. Like, oh, I'll be a bad guy. It's like, you'll be a bad guy for 2 days and then it'll just go away. Just trust me, take their phone away. So put the phone on the front table and they come and sit down and they've got nothing else to do but turn and talk to the people beside them. In when I first started teaching, 2004, you'd walk into class and just it'd be noise from everybody talking. You have to get them all settled down. Like, okay, guys, let's go. Come on, time for class. And you finally, like after 30 seconds, got them settled down to where you could roll into class. And you could also get conversation out of them. Like, so how was your weekend? What'd you guys do? What was cool and exciting? And you can actually have some cool interaction with them for 5 minutes before you start with the lecture. And then when the cell phone era hit, especially smartphones, everything radically changed. You'd walk into class and it'd be dead silent. Everyone would be staring at their phones. And then you move into my new era where I steal the phones from them. And lo and behold, I'm back at that point. And that actually happened this past semester. I walked in and I'm getting ready and they're just noisy. They were so noisy. And I almost said, guys, what's going on? And it dawned on me like, wait a minute. And I actually told them, I said, you know what? I'm really, really happy right now. I'm proud of you guys. And because they were actually talking. And it sounds weird. If you're older, you're like, why are you proud of them for talking? You don't know what it's like to walk into a room and it's deathly quiet because everyone's just sitting there mindlessly scrolling. And it's not just in the classroom. I've seen it in the dentist's office. You go in and it's just quiet. No one wants to talk to each other. Everyone's just buried in their phones. Everyone from the little kids up to grandma, everyone's buried in their phones. That in-person experience is gone. Even flying in a plane. When was the last time you were in a plane? You sit down, you go to turn to say hi to the person sitting next to you, and they put earbuds in, like, leave me alone. And it's just like this weird thing. So instead of having this really cool conversation over the span of, an hour or two, getting to know this fellow human being that you're stuck next to in this little aluminum tube for a couple hours, you're now just stuck there, sitting there. So if you didn't bring a book, you're in trouble, or if you didn't bring your own earbuds, you're in trouble, but it's just one of those things that we're losing our humanity, and it's not like it's being taken from us. We're actively choosing to do so. I know people like to blame the algorithm for hooking people and cell phone addiction and all that stuff. You have still chosen to do it. You can put your phone down. You can leave it at home. You'll survive. But the thing is we want to be in this world, but we shouldn't. It's against our nature. And we've seen this death of these in-person experiences that it's just not a good place for us to be. It's not a healthy place for us to be. And it's something that we should actively reject and run from. We are not meant to be alone. No man is an island. We are meant to be with other people. And we should flee from all the things that block us from doing so. Now, I'm not saying we always need to be around people. Obviously, there's plenty of times where you just need to get away and just enjoy some quiet. No big deal at all. It's the continual choice of living there. And it's killing these in-person experiences. Cruising doesn't exist. Going to the roller rink is like super rare, and it just doesn't happen. People don't even go to movies much anymore. They just don't. Now there's tons of reason for that too, but we'll get to that another day. But barbecues, reunions, they just don't happen. Why? Why do it? Because I can stay at home and I can live in my little phone world and do little of nothing. And then we wonder why mental health issues are through the roof. There's a saying, go out and touch grass, and it exists for a reason. Because when you sit in a digital world, you miss all of the true things of nature that you're missing. But one of the true things of nature you're missing, in-person interaction. So don't just go out and touch grass. Go out and find somebody and talk to them face to face. Enjoy that moment. Enjoy that other person. That's what I have for you today. Thank you so very much for tuning in. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. I would appreciate that greatly. If you didn't like what you heard, that's okay. Thanks for tuning in anyway. But I'll see you next time on Communicology.